मदीना 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 बड़ा लुत्फ देता है नामे मदीना। तुम्हें कुछ खबर है कहाँ जा
मैं आपके अंदर की
रसूल
जमीन और कायनात को झंझोड़ने के लिए आया हूँ।
तुम्हें कुछ खबर है मैं क्या पा रहा हूँ, मोहब्बत का उनकी मजा पा रहा हूँ। जब इस बज़्म से चल दिए दोस्त अक्सर और उठते चले जा रहे हैं बराबर, हर वक्त पेशे नजर है ये मंजर, यहाँ पर तेरा दिल बहलता है क्यों कर। जगह जी लगाने की दुनिया नहीं है, ये इबरत की जा है तमाशा नहीं है, जहाँ में कहीं शोर मातम बपा है, कहीं फिक्र फाका से आहो बका है, कहीं शिकवा जोरो मकरो दवा है, हर तरफ से यही बस सदा है।
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi al-Kareem, Nabiyyina wa Habibina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'du, faqala Allahu tabaraka wa ta'ala, kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut wa innama tuwaffawna ujurakum yawma al-qiyamah. فمن زحزح عن النار وأدخل الجنة فقد فاز وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور. وقال الله تبارك وتعالى وأن ليس للإنسان إلا ما سعى وأن سعيه سوف يرى ثم يجزاه الجزاء الأوفى وأن إلى ربك المنتهى. صدق الله العظيم. This morning I received a wave of messages and phone calls, some informing me, some asking me about what happened with Brother Junaid Jamshed. And after verifying the news with close friends of myself and Brother Junaid, it was confirmed that he has in fact passed away in a plane crash on the way back from Nusra of a Masturat Jamaat along with his wife. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Allahumma aghfir lahu warhamhu wa'afihi wa'afu anhu wa akrim nuzulahu wa wassi' mudkhalahu waghsilhu bil ma'i wal thalji wal barad. اللهم نقه من الذنوب والخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس. اللهم أبدله دارا خيرا من داره وأهلا خيرا من أهله وزوجا خيرا من زوجه. اللهم لا تفتنا بعده ولا تحرمنا أجره. اللهم اغفر لنا وله. This news has affected millions of people around the world. And everyone, I'm sure, has their own story of how they interacted with him, how they came into contact with him or heard of him. Some will tell about how his naats and nasheeds or inspiring speeches touched them. And others will talk about how his magnetic and bright personality influenced them. Youngsters will talk about how they changed the path of their life when they saw the changes he made in his life. And elders will talk about how they became rejuvenated and inspired by listening to his talks and interacting with him. There will be many stories to be told and many wonderful incidents that we don't know about today that will unfold over the days to come. Because of my relationship with him, my friendship with him, and because so many people are messaging and calling, I thought it would be appropriate to perhaps give a little bit about my story with Junaid Jamshed, what it was and how it came to be. The first time I saw Junaid was in 2002 at the Karachi Ijtima. And we were in the foreigners section, and in this section called the Khawas section. And there I was requested by the Amir of that department to help gather the majma after the salawat. In other words, after the salat takes place, to help gather everyone for the talks that are taking place from the mimbar. This place of the Khawas was a massive tent, and there were a few thousand people there. So I was asked to gather people from one side, and there was this tall gentleman with a short stubble beard. He was asked to gather the crowd on the other side. I was later told that this is someone with the name of Junaid Jamshed, and he is a singer, and he's a very popular Pakistani singer. And I didn't really interact with him, but I saw him very, very earnestly talking to the people. And every time he gathered the people, he had one message for them that he repeated. And that was, brothers, I'm trying to change my life. You should also try to change yours and make dua for me. Every time he stood up to gather the crowd, he would say this, please make dua for me, I'm trying. So this was the period where Junaid was transitioning from a pop star to someone completely different. Then many years passed, and in 2009, while I was doing some studies in Pakistan, I was requested by some brothers to go to do Nusrat. Nusrat means to go and join a Jamaat and spend some time with them and give them some company, look after them, take care of them, make sure they're okay. So there was a Jamaat that was led by the former cricket star Sayyid Anwar that were out in the interior of Sindh. And this was a Jamaat of youngsters. So they had requested that we come and spend some time with those youngsters. So this was on Friday morning. We were preparing to go there. Then the brother who was taking me called me and said, Sheikh, we have a problem. And that is that I have a Jamaat now in my own local masjid. And because I'm from that masjid, they have requested me to not go out into the interior, but to spend time and come for Nusrat to their Jamaat. And Brother Junaid Jamshed is in that Jamaat as well. It's from his local masjid. And he has requested me to bring you there as well. So I changed my program, and the brother came to pick me up. And I had heard about Junaid, I had heard his nasheeds, and I was concerned about meeting with this person who was a celebrity that, first of all, what is my intention of going and meeting him? And I made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep my intention sincere. And secondly, I was apprehensive of all of a sudden being seen with this person and then being misunderstood or misportrayed. Because at that time in Karachi, we had started a program for youth, and hundreds of youngsters started coming to that program. And some people took this complaint to our elders that these people are starting a new movement here in Karachi. And with this movement, they are countering the work of Tabligh, or they're trying to break off people from that effort and bring them into their own kind of group, which was obviously not the case. But the apprehension was there and had already been admonished once by the elders of Karachi. And when I explained to them what I was doing, they of course understood and believed. But I did not want to be seen as someone who is trying to connect with popular people with the intention of increasing my own following. So I made a lot of dua before going. And then we went and we joined their Jamaat. They were conducting Taaleem at that time. And then my tashkil was made to go with Brother Junaid to a local university, the Naval University, as it was in Karachi. So we went there, we prayed Jummah there, and we did some Jola. We met some of the professors and people in charge, and we made our way back, and basically we spent the whole day together. We talked about all kinds of things, and we found that we were very comfortable with one another. And he is a very easy person to talk to. He's someone who's very, very outgoing, very welcoming, very understanding. During that afternoon, we were visited by an actor from Karachi who was sharing his issues while he was trying to get closer to Deen, and we spent a few hours with him. I gave them some karguzaris, some kind of highlights of my own experiences. Then the Jamaat and Brother Junaid requested me to give the bayan that evening after Maghrib. And I very politely declined. My real reason for declining was what I just mentioned before, that I did not want to be portrayed as this person who is trying to create a platform for himself and using these people as a means for that. I did not want to come into that limelight. And I didn't share that with them. I just told them that I really have to get back. So what they did was, after trying to get me to stay, they finally agreed to, me giving a talk after Asr. And this was a time when it's called, in Urdu they call it the Darmiyani talk, or the sitting talk, where, well, everyone is out for Jola and people are coming, some people are sitting, there's just a few people sitting there, so it's kind of a very light and informal type of a talk. So I said that's okay because there's no crowd there. And Brother Junaid, of course, he was appointed to go and meet certain people. So I sat down and I started talking. Much to my surprise, Junaid went with his Jamaat to the gate of the masjid and then said something to the Amir And he snuck back and very quietly came and sat down in my talk. And he sat there for the whole talk, and I finished the talk just before Maghrib. And he came up to me and he said, Sheikh, I have a lot of ulama as my friends in South Africa, in the UK, all around the world. And he said, usually when I go somewhere, people ask me for my contact, and they ask me permission that can we stay in touch with you. But he said today I want to request to you that can I please have your contact and can I please stay in touch with you. And I was really struck by this person's humility. And so I said to him, Junaid bhai, I am not worthy of being in contact with you, and I'm not worthy of you being in contact with me. And he in turn said that, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you like this always. I shared my number with him, my Pakistani number, and then I left. The next morning, as I was leaving Darul Ifta at Binuri Town, where I was doing my specialization in fiqh and ifta, I get a call. Now, I don't know the number. I pick up the call and it's Junaid. And he says, Maulana, you really messed us up. You screwed up our whole Jamaat. I said, okay, I'm sorry. He said, first of all, you told us so many beautiful things, and then right when we had all the questions, you left us. And our whole Jamaat is so upset at you for doing that. Again, I said, I'm sorry, but I had to leave. He said, well, I have a question about one of the hadiths you mentioned yesterday. Can you please go over it again? Because you mentioned 3 things in that hadith, and we only remember 2 of them. There was a hadith from Tirmidhi. So he said, okay, I'm putting you on speaker, and we're sitting here in Ta'aleem. We need to hear that hadith. So I repeated the whole hadith to them. And then our call ended. I said, okay. A few days later, an issue broke out in Karachi where there was a person who was trying to create a sect. At least this was the allegation, that he's trying to create a sect and he's taking people away from the basic teachings of Islam by using the Quran. And the people he was working on were people from the media industry, actors, singers, who were starting to become inclined towards religion. This person was kind of dazzling them with his intellectual discourses and then misleading them. So again, I found myself thrown together with Brother Junaid Jamshed, who was also called in to help in this and give guidance to all of these media people. So again, we started we bumped into each other and we had these kinds of discussions. And then I told him that, okay, it's time for me to go back now. I'm going back to Canada. And he told me that we will be in touch. Khair, after coming back to Canada, then I moved to Vancouver, and sometime after moving here, I get a call from Toronto, and it's Brother Junaid Jamshed. And he was really, really mad. He said, what kind of friend are you? I come to your country and you don't even come to see me. I said, I don't even know you're here. How am I supposed to? He says, I'm here in Toronto right now, and I want to meet you. I said, really? Okay. So I said, why don't we do this? I said, why don't you come down and we'll set up a program for you. Give me a little bit of time. He said, okay, fine. So, and he said, look, I don't care about any program. I just want to come and spend a couple of days with you and just relax with you. I said, okay. This was the first program that we arranged for Junaid Jamshed here in Surrey. And I think the attendance for that program was close to 1,600 people. And it was just a motivational and an educational program where he came, he shared his life story, and he recited nasheeds, and there was no other objective. And then the rest of the time we just hung out. We went here and there, and like this, he came once, he came twice, and in between the meetings, if I happened to be in Toronto, for example, I'd go and meet him. If he was visiting, he would call me, and we were going back and forth like this. And during this time, he got familiar with our setup over here, Al-Ihsan, and he was very, very passionate about it. And he says that, look, I don't see anything like this happening from here all the way till Toronto. That's the next stop, basically, where things of this nature take place. But the rest of Canada is kind of empty. And he kept encouraging me, and he said, you need to do something, you need to do something, you need to expand this, you need to do this. And I said, look, I'm so busy with teaching and running the affairs of the institute that I don't really have too much opportunities to expand. He said, no, you have to. And I said, look, I'm not a big fundraiser. It's not in my nature to go and ask people for money. I find it to be a very difficult task. But he wouldn't take that as an answer. He said, no, you're going to do it, and I'm going to do it with you. And he said, set up a program, and I'm going to come, and we're going to do this together. And he says, for me, this is sadaqah jariyah. This is a means of my akhirah. And he said, when I leave this world, I want to have ulama and huffaz and all the reward that they've earned in their life in my account. So we set up a program where we did kind of a road trip over a period of 4 days. We met up in Winnipeg, and we did a program there on Friday, and mashallah, it was a beautiful turnout, very well organized program by the brothers over there. In fact, some of our brothers from Vancouver, may Allah reward them, they traveled to Winnipeg. They were originally from Winnipeg. They traveled there ahead of time and helped organize everything. Then the next day, the Saturday, was in Calgary, and there also it was a massive program with a huge turnout. And then the third day, the Sunday, was here in Surrey. And then on the Monday, we went to Kamloops. And it was a very memorable journey and trip. When we went to Kamloops, he was kind of shocked. He says, where have you brought me? This is the middle of nowhere. He looked at the airport. He said, this is an airport? And we were going through the city like at around 4 p.m. and I said, check out the rush hour. And there were like 2 cars on the road. And we just had a big laugh. He says, I don't know why you brought me out here, but let's see what happens. Then we had a little program in their masjid Monday evening. Alhamdulillah, still a very good turnout for a small city like that. And then the next morning we flew back in one of these little tiny planes, and then we concluded his trip and he went back. And from time to time he would call me, he would message me to see how things are. And he would always say, how is our madrasa doing? How is our madrasa? How are your students? How are the brothers there? Is everything okay? What are you doing next? And I would update him on all the activities and this and this and this. And in the last couple of years, as many of you know, he's gone through some really hard times. People have given him a lot of problems. And so we would talk about that. Sometimes we would talk for an hour just about what he was going through. And he would tell me his feelings and what it was that was hurting him, and what people were doing. And through that, I got to see a person who was so sincere and so devoted to his cause. This was a person that you would never hear any negativity from. It's one of the most positive and optimistic people I've ever met. There's no room in his personality for backbiting, for talking bad about someone or something. We never ever had those kinds of discussions. And reflecting to a few years back, when we were sitting in my home having supper, he said to me, he said, I'm 46 years old. And as far as I'm concerned, I just have 4 more years and then my mission is complete. Then I have nothing left to do in this world. I said, really? He said, that's it. He said, I just want the name of Allah and the name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be on the tongues of everybody. And I have my own way of doing it. And I want to give it all I have for the next 4 years. And then my job here is done. And it's been 4 years since he said that. The brother who took me to his Jamaat initially, Hafiz Ashraf, a mutual friend, he was just telling me this morning that recently Junaid Bhai was making a lot of dua that, oh Allah, grant me death in your path. Allow me to die in your path. He said we used to hear this from him all the time. I spoke to Junaid Bhai 10 days ago. And when we spoke, when he called me, I said, Junaid Bhai, where are you? He said, I'm in the Islamic Republic of Houston. I said, well, now that you're there, it is going to become an Islamic Republic. And so we chatted for probably about an hour. And he updated me on what was going on with him. And I updated him about madrasa and what we're up to. And he was just being himself, saying all the kinds of things that he always said, all the encouraging things. And he recited some couplets, I guess they were lyrics from some old song that he used to sing. And he said, who would think that a song that I sang 30 years ago, I would come to realize its meaning now after talking to you. So he was a very kind of a sentimental, emotional, very, very loving and giving person. He was not a reserved person who would keep everything to himself. He was very open and outgoing. And he said, it's been a long time since we've met. So let's meet up. He says, I feel like sitting with you and talking to you. And I said, you know what? It's true. So why don't you come down? And it seems like this was always how our programs that we set got initiated. Let's meet up. And I would say, okay, come down. And I said, you know what? You remember those programs I used to call you for? Where on New Year's Eve we used to have this program for the youngsters and this. He said, yeah. I said, you want to do that? He said, let's do it. He says, I'm coming to Toronto on the week of the 25th, and I'll just come over to your place from there. And so we decided this program for the 1st of January. He said, look, I have to jump over to New Jersey for a bit, just for one day, then I'll come straight to you from there. And he said, I'm going back to Pakistan tomorrow, and then I come back and we'll just go over the details, and then I look forward to seeing you. And that was our last conversation. And just last night, we were talking about this program that we were supposed to have on the 1st with Brother Junaid, but it wasn't written for him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decided a time and a place where he would go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, in retrospect, I see a few things. The problems and the emotional anguish that he felt, that he experienced over the last 2 years, it seemed like it was a system of cleansing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we read hadith, we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings these problems to test us and to cleanse us. And the reward for the people of sabr, إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّ الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to lock that person in to this arrangement of reward that is unparalleled. And so he brings difficulties. There is no other way to reach that status. In one hadith, it's mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes has a status prepared for someone, but the person is not able to reach that status just by their worship and just by their ibadat. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings trials and tribulations, and through those a person excels. They move forward very, very quickly and they reach that status, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls them back. Brother Junaid is going to be remembered by millions of people. I remember him sending me a clipping of a work that has the 500 most influential Muslims in the world. And he would send it to me and he would say, look, your brother made it on this list. Make dua for me. So he is going to be remembered and commemorated in many, many ways, with many, many thousands of interactions that he's had with people over the last few years. And the people that opposed him for no reason, no one's going to remember them. No one's going to talk about them. Because this man had a mission. He had a mission, he had an objective, he had a message, and his life revolved around it. There are some people whose work revolves around opposition. The only reason they're in business is because they're opposed to someone. And so their work thrives on cutting people off from others. This is what their work is based on. You have to cut out so and so. You have to make them into an enemy. Because if you don't have an opposition, you have no relevance. The only reason you're there is because you're opposing so and so, and you have to make them out to be the biggest demon possible. And your entire work revolves around that. There is no importance for such work. There's no merit for it in dunya or in akhirah. But someone who has a message of good and is working day and night to convey it, and they're not speaking out against people, they're speaking about their cause, about their message will be taken and it will spread, and they will be remembered for the sacrifices that they made. This man has to his account hundreds of institutions. Ours is just one of them. But I know of institutes here in North America where Brother Junaid Jamshed has raised almost all of the money for their projects. Entirely. And he would tell me that this is my way of securing my akhirah. This is my investment in my akhirah. This was not about money for him. There was no monetary gain. When he came here, he never expected anything. He never asked for anything. That's just not what he was and who he was. And I think in many ways he showed us that a person should not dwell on their past and let it overwhelm them. A person should build their future and work on their future. Because if he had dwelled in his past, he would never have come out of his old life, and he would just be looked at today as possibly a retired singer, and that's it. But I remember when he came here, he told the crowd that, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I had a crowd in front of me and the mic was in front of me. And 20, 30 years later, I still have a crowd in front of me and I still have the mic in front of me. What has changed? He says, my life has changed and my message has changed. And he used to say that whenever you make a sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it always comes back. It always comes back. I remember once we were in the car and we were talking about this transition of his and the hardships that he went through, and he said, he says, Mufti Sahab, one thing I want to share with you. If there's one thing that I can say that I feel it kind of bothers me or it disturbs me, is that I had to let go of a lot of really good friends when I changed my life. People that I worked with, colleagues and associates, I was very, very close with them, and we had a lot of love and friendship. If there's one thing that I feel like I dwell on a little bit, it's not the money, it's not the fame, it's not any of those things. It's just that I wonder about those friends. So I said that when a person leaves something for the sake of Allah, Allah replaces it with something better. Man taraka shay'an lillah awwadahu Allahu khayran minhu. Person who leaves something for the sake of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaces it with something better. I said, you did leave the companionship of those people. You had to, otherwise you would keep being pulled into that life. You would keep getting sucked into that lifestyle. So you had to leave them so that you could move on. They were your companions at that time. But tell me, Junaid bhai, who are your companions today? Are you not sitting with great ulama, great elders, great awliyaullah? Did Allah not replace that companionship with the companionship of such amazing people, such wonderful people, pious people? He said, you're right. He said, you're right. Allah gave me the chance to spend time and be very, very intimately close with people that the world dreams of being with. And the world desires to spend time with them. I meet with them every day. So in this is also a message that we should never hesitate to leave something for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Because when our dealing is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there can only be gains. And this was a man who was very, very dearly attached to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not only does his art or his nasheeds reflect that, but I think his life also reflects it. And this is a man, I can say it now, since he's no longer here. This is a man who used to get up in the middle of the night and cry in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He never stopped begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness over his past life. And he never stopped asking Allah to make him a better person. And he leaves this world having founded and having assisted in founding probably dozens or hundreds of institutions. I remember at one point he mentioned that his charitable foundation, the Junaid Jamshed Foundation, they have founded hundreds of small madrasas across Pakistan. And they have helped thousands and thousands of orphans. Sometimes a project of getting water to them, to areas like in interior Sindh where there's no water. And other times getting young girls married off and carrying all the expenses of that. And sometimes it's one thing, sometimes it's another thing. So I think we should all find our calling. He found his calling and he devoted his life to it. We should find our calling and devote our lives to it. And we shouldn't step back. We shouldn't hold ourselves or withhold ourselves, restrain ourselves. We should give it everything we have and have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept the efforts that he has made. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give all of his followers, his fans, his friends, those that are affiliated with him, the ability to follow that same spirit. He was a murid of Mufti Taqi Usmani Sahab. I remember once in Karachi, we just happened to bump into each other at the majlis of Sheikh Taqi Uthmani that he was having every Sunday after Asr. So we met up there. He came and gave me a big hug, and he said, "Come, I want to take you to meet my Sheikh. I want to take you to meet my..." He was really, really excited. He became like a little child, and he was so scared and so shy in going in front of Mufti Sahib. Now, I said, I don't think I need to go meet him. Alhamdulillah, I meet him regularly. He said, "No, I want to come with you." And so we walked after Mufti Sahib as he was walking back to his home, and we met him right outside his door, and he was very welcoming, Sheikh Taqi Usmani Sahib, Dawat Barakatuhum. And then Junaid Bhai introduces him, "This is my friend Mufti Aasim Rashid from Canada." Mufti Sahib gave me a big smile. He says, "Yes, I know him." And subhanallah, I saw that the innocence and the shyness of a student in front of his teacher, a murid in front of his sheikh, I saw that in him as well. And it was really something to see in someone who is such a big personality in and of himself. My advice to all our young brothers and sisters is that we should become true with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should become sincere with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Run towards Allah and don't look back. Allah will not fail us. Allah will not let us down. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may put us through some tests and trials, but He is the most reliable friend and the most trustworthy trustee. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enlighten Junaid Bhai's grave and make all of the phases of akhirah easy for him. May Allah accept all his good works and put it in his scale of good deeds, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspire people through him after his passing away as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired people while he was alive. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.